The recycled air of an airplane cabin holds 1,000 untold stories. But on Ascend Air Flight 7112 from New York to London, a story was about to unfold that would shake the entire airline to its core. It began with a simple request, a dismissive sneer, and a woman in a gray tracksuit who held a power no one on that flight could possibly comprehend. For Tiffany Miller, the lead flight attendant, this woman was just another problem, another entitled passenger trying to game the system. But Tiffany was about to learn a brutal lesson at 30,000 feet. Sometimes the quietest passengers have the loudest voices, and judgment is a turbulence that can bring a career crashing to the ground. This isn't just a story about bad customer service. It's about the moment a gatekeeper of a tiny, pressurized kingdom came face to face with the queen of the entire empire. The fluorescent lights of John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hummed with a familiar, anxious energy. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, last call announcements, and the muffled chatter of 1,000 different journeys beginning or ending. Dr. Evelyn Reed, however, was an island of calm in this chaotic sea. Dressed in a simple, well-worn gray cashmere tracksuit and comfortable sneakers, she looked less like a world-renowned pediatric oncologist on her way to keynote a major European medical conference, and more like a weary traveler hoping for an easy flight. Her hair was pulled back into a simple, elegant bun, and her face, devoid of makeup, showed the faint lines of a woman who spent more time comforting frightened parents and puzzling over complex medical charts than she did on herself. She clutched a worn copy of The Emperor of All Maladies, its spine cracked from countless readings. For Evelyn, long-haul flights were a sanctuary, a rare, uninterrupted block of time to read, to think, and to decompress from the emotional weight of her work. She didn't need luxury, she just needed peace. Her ticket was for premium economy, a comfortable enough compromise for the 7-hour journey across the Atlantic. Her husband Marcus had insisted really, on booking her into the first-class suite, but she had gently declined. "It feels wasteful, honey," she'd said over the phone. "Use the money to fund another research grant. I just need a seat that reclines and a place to put my book." As the boarding call for Ascend Air Flight 7112 echoed through the lounge, Evelyn joined the queue. She noticed the lead flight attendant standing at the aircraft door, a tall blonde woman with a smile that was perfectly manicured but didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name tag read Tiffany. Tiffany Miller's gaze was like a high-powered scanner, sweeping over each passenger, categorizing and filing them away in an instant. Her eyes lingered for a fraction of a second too long on Evelyn's casual attire, a subtle, almost imperceptible curl of her lip betraying her thoughts. Evelyn had seen that look 1,000 times in her life. It was the look that questioned her presence in certain spaces, from advanced science seminars in college to the upscale restaurants Marcus loved. She had learned long ago not to let it sting. It was a reflection of their world, not hers. A younger, fresh-faced flight attendant with a kind smile and a name tag that read Daniel offered Evelyn a genuine welcome. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome aboard." "Thank you, Daniel," Evelyn replied warmly, her voice soft but clear. As she moved past Tiffany, however, the lead attendant's welcome was clipped and cool. "Your seat is 15C, straight down on your right." She didn't make eye contact, her attention already focused on the next passenger, a man in a crisp Brioni suit who received the full force of her dazzling, professional smile. Evelyn found her seat in the small, quiet, premium economy cabin. It was perfectly adequate, more legroom than economy, a wider seat, and an amenity kit. She settled in, placing her book in the seat back pocket and preparing for the long flight ahead. As the final passengers boarded, she glanced forward toward the first-class cabin, separated by a thin curtain. She saw Tiffany fawning over the passengers there, her voice a syrupy confection of deference and charm. She laughed at a man's joke, took a woman's coat with the care of a museum curator handling a priceless artifact, and offered pre-departure champagne with a flourish. Evelyn watched, not with envy, but with the detached curiosity of a social scientist observing a peculiar ritual. The final passenger to board was a harried-looking man who practically sprinted down the aisle, talking loudly into his phone about a deal that was absolutely going to close by morning. He squeezed his oversized carry-on into the last remaining overhead bin, spaced directly above Evelyn's head with a grunt, bumping her shoulder without a word of apology. He then collapsed into the seat next to her, 15D, and immediately continued his loud, aggressive conversation. Evelyn sighed internally, so much for a peaceful flight. She pulled out her noise-canceling headphones, a gift from Marcus, and tried to lose herself in the pre-flight safety video. The engine's low rumble began to build, a promise of movement and escape. As the plane taxied onto the runway, the man beside her finally ended his call with a triumphant, "Lock it in!" and immediately began snoring, his head lolling onto her shoulder. Evelyn gently nudged him, but he was completely oblivious. She looked around the cabin. It was full. Every seat was taken. She glanced forward again, toward the curtain that separated her world from the serene luxury of first class. Before the curtain was drawn, she had counted at least 4 empty seats in the spacious cabin. An idea, born not of entitlement, but of a simple desire for a quiet place to rest before a demanding conference, began to form in her mind. It was a simple, reasonable request, or so she thought. The ascent was smooth, the Boeing 777 piercing through the clouds above New York City until the urban glow was just a faint memory against the vast, dark canvas of the night sky. The seatbelt sign pinged off, and the cabin crew began their service. Evelyn had managed to reposition the snoring man, so he was leaning against the window, but the cabin still felt cramped and a little chaotic. The air of quiet she had hoped for was proving elusive. She patiently waited for a lull in the service before she unbuckled her seatbelt and walked the few steps to the forward galley. Daniel was there, arranging drinks on a cart. "Excuse me, Daniel?" Evelyn said softly. He turned, his smile immediate and genuine. "Yes, ma'am? Can I get you something?" "I was just wondering," she began, her tone polite and unassuming. "I noticed on my way in that there appeared to be a few empty seats in the first-class cabin. My seatmate is, well, he's having a very deep sleep, and I have a rather important conference to prepare for when we land. I was wondering if it might be possible to get an upgrade." She added quickly, "I'm more than happy to pay the difference, of course. I just need a bit of quiet space." Daniel's expression was sympathetic. He had seen the man in 15D and heard his phone call. "I completely understand, ma'am. Let me check the manifest for you. Unfortunately, any upgrades have to be approved by Tiffany, the lead purser. She's just up in the first-class galley. One moment." He disappeared through the curtain. Evelyn waited, a small knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. She could hear muffled voices from the other side, Daniel's earnest, low tones, and Tiffany's sharper, more dismissive replies. A moment later, the curtain was swept aside with a dramatic flourish, and Tiffany Miller stood before her, arms crossed, her expression a mask of chilly authority. Her eyes, which had been warm and engaging for the passengers in her charge, were now like chips of ice. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "Yes," Evelyn replied, maintaining her calm demeanor. "I was just speaking with Daniel. I was hoping to inquire about upgrading to one of the empty seats in first class. As I explained to him, my current situation is a little disruptive, and I'd be grateful for the space. I'm happy to pay for it." Tiffany stared at Evelyn for a long moment, her gaze once again sweeping over the simple gray tracksuit, as if the fabric itself were an insult. "Ma'am," she said, drawing the word out, "upgrades are processed at the gate, not on the aircraft. It's against company policy." "Oh, I see," Evelyn said. "I wasn't aware. I've been upgraded mid-flight on other airlines before, especially when there are empty seats and a reason." "Well, this is Ascend-Air," Tiffany retorted, a smug little smile playing on her lips. "We have procedures. The first-class cabin is prepared for a specific number of passengers. The catering, the amenities, the staffing, it's all been allocated. We can't simply move people around because their seatmate snores." Her tone implied Evelyn was a child asking for something utterly unreasonable. The lie about catering and amenities was transparent. An extra meal and an amenity kit were hardly logistical impossibilities. This wasn't about policy, it was about power. "I understand that," Evelyn said, her voice still even. "But the seats are physically empty. Surely making a paying customer more comfortable would be good for business?" It seems like a simple transaction. Tiffany's smile vanished. Our first-class passengers pay a significant premium for their exclusivity and privacy, she said, her voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper, as if sharing a great secret. Part of what they pay for is not to be disturbed by people wandering up from other cabins asking for freebies. The insult was no longer veiled. It was sharp, deliberate, and aimed to wound. Evelyn felt a flush of anger, but she pushed it down, her years of dealing with high-stress, life-or-death situations having taught her the value of emotional control. I am not asking for a freebie, Evelyn stated, her voice quiet but firm, each word carefully enunciated. I am offering to pay. I am a customer requesting to purchase a product you have available. An empty seat. The seats are not available for purchase at this time, Tiffany snapped, her patience clearly gone. That is the final word. Now, if you'll please return to your designated seat, you're blocking the galley. She turned her back on Evelyn, a clear dismissal. Daniel, who had witnessed the entire exchange, looked mortified. He gave Evelyn an apologetic glance, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. Evelyn gave him a small, reassuring nod before turning and walking back to her seat. She sat down, the snores of her neighbor seeming louder than before. The injustice of the situation burned, not because she was denied a luxury, but because of the disdain with which she was treated. Tiffany hadn't seen a customer. She had seen a black woman in a tracksuit and made a series of assumptions. She had judged Evelyn as someone who didn't belong, someone who was trying to get something she hadn't earned. And in doing so, she had sealed her own fate. Evelyn buckled her seatbelt, the quiet click echoing the sound of a decision being made in her mind. This was no longer about a seat, it was about respect. An hour bled into 2. The cabin lights were dimmed and most passengers were asleep or watching movies, their faces bathed in the blue glow of their screens. Evelyn couldn't settle. The blatant disrespect from Tiffany Miller gnawed at her. She had spent her entire life working twice as hard to get half as far, breaking barriers in a field dominated by white men. She had earned her success through relentless dedication, intelligence, and empathy. To be dismissed so contemptuously, based on nothing more than her appearance, felt like a regression to a time she thought society was moving past. The drink service began again. Daniel pushed the cart down the aisle, his movements hesitant as he approached row 15. Ma'am, he whispered, leaning in. Can I get you anything? Water? Juice? On the house. Water would be lovely, thank you, Daniel, Evelyn said, appreciating his small act of kindness. And thank you for trying to help earlier. It wasn't your fault. I'm really sorry about that, he murmured, his eyes darting toward the front of the plane. Tiffany, she can be very particular about the rules, especially with the first-class cabin. It seemed less about rules and more about assumptions, Evelyn stated simply, without malice. Daniel's silence was a confirmation. He handed her a bottle of water and a small bag of pretzels, then quickly moved on. A few minutes later, the curtain to first class parted and Tiffany emerged. A practiced smile plastered on her face. She was checking on her premium passengers. She stopped at the seat of the man in the Brioni suit, Mr. Henderson, who was now awake and looking irritable. Is everything to your satisfaction, Mr. Henderson? Tiffany asked, her voice once again the smooth, deferential purr Evelyn had heard during boarding. The Scotch selection is mediocre at best, he grumbled, holding up his glass. This is a 12-year single malt. For what I paid for this ticket, I expect at least an 18-year. Instead of citing policy, Tiffany's response was one of profound apology. You are absolutely right to expect the best, Mr. Henderson. I am so sorry. Let me see what I can do. I believe we may have a special bottle reserved for our charter clients. I'll check for you immediately. She bustled off, her entire demeanor one of urgent servitude. Evelyn watched the performance with a sense of grim fascination. The rules, it seemed, were flexible, contingent on the perceived status of the passenger making the request. Later, Evelyn felt a chill. The cabin air was cold, and the thin blanket provided in premium economy offered little warmth. She saw Tiffany walking down the aisle and politely raised her hand. Excuse me, miss? Tiffany stopped, her expression hardening as she recognized Evelyn. Yes? I was wondering if I might be able to get another blanket. It's quite cold. Tiffany's eyes flickered down to the blanket on Evelyn's lap. We provide one blanket per passenger in premium economy. We have to ensure we have enough for everyone. I understand, but if there are any spare— There are not, Tiffany said flatly, her eyes daring Evelyn to challenge her. She then turned to the woman in the row across from Evelyn, a white woman in her 50s. Are you comfortable, ma'am? Can I get you anything? Another pillow? The message was clear. Her cruelty was as deliberate as it was petty. Evelyn leaned back in her seat, her mind racing. This was a pattern of behavior. It was targeted, and it was happening on an airline owned by her husband. Marcus Thorne was a self-made man who had built Ascend from 2 leased planes into a global luxury carrier. His entire brand was built on one principle: unparalleled customer service and respect for every passenger. He often said, "The moment we forget that the person in seat 34B is just as important as the person in 1A is the moment we start to fail." He would be horrified. He would be furious. But it was more than that. This was a direct insult to her. Tiffany's behavior wasn't just poor service. It was a personal affront fueled by a toxic mix of classism and racism. To let it go would be to validate Tiffany's worldview. It would mean accepting that in the year 2025, a black woman in a tracksuit was inherently less worthy of respect than a white man in a designer suit. She wouldn't do it. Summoning a calm she didn't feel, Evelyn unbuckled her belt and stood up one more time. She walked steadily forward, past a startled Daniel, and straight through the curtain into the first-class cabin. The atmosphere was hushed, the lighting soft. Mr. Henderson was now sipping a darker amber liquid from a crystal tumbler with a satisfied smirk. Tiffany was standing near the galley, chatting with another flight attendant. When she saw Evelyn, her face contorted with rage. "I told you to remain in your cabin," she hissed, striding toward Evelyn, her voice low but vibrating with fury. "This area is for first-class passengers only. This is your final warning." Evelyn stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "I am not here to ask for a seat, Tiffany. I am here to tell you that your behavior tonight has been unacceptable. Your treatment of me has been discriminatory and unprofessional. You have lied about company policy and have chosen to enforce your rules based on your own personal prejudices. I want your full name and your employee identification number." The audacity of the request stunned Tiffany into silence for a second. Passengers in the nearby seats were starting to notice, their heads turning. "How dare you?" Tiffany finally sputtered, her face flushing a deep red. "You are creating a disturbance. You are being aggressive. If you do not return to your seat immediately, I will be forced to inform the captain, and we can have you restrained and met by authorities upon landing in London." The threat hung in the air, heavy and absurd. Evelyn, a woman who held the lives of sick children in her hands every day, being accused of aggression for simply demanding to be treated with basic human dignity. "I am perfectly calm," Evelyn said, her voice like steel. "I am simply informing you of your conduct. Now, for the last time, I would like your name and ID number." "Get out!" Tiffany shrieked, her professional veneer completely shattered. "Get out of my cabin now!" Evelyn looked at the furious, hate-filled face of the woman before her. She had her answer. She didn't need the ID number. She had the name. Tiffany Miller, Flight 7112. That was all that would be required. Without another word, Evelyn turned and walked back through the curtain, leaving a stunned and silent first-class cabin in her wake. She sat down, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with a cold, clear resolve. Tiffany had mistaken her quietness for weakness. She was about to discover how wrong she was. Back in her seat, the world seemed to shrink to the small, illuminated screen of her phone. The snores of her neighbor, the hum of the engines, the glares she could feel from the front of the cabin, it all faded into the background. Her hands were steady as she navigated to the in-flight Wi-Fi portal and purchased a full flight access package. The transaction was seamless. Her credit card, a Black American Express Centurion card issued to Evelyn R. Thorne, was approved in an instant. It was a card she rarely used, preferring her own, but tonight it felt like a small, private piece of armor. She opened her messaging app. Her conversation with Marcus was at the top, filled with a string of loving goodnight messages and photos of their golden retriever, Winston, hogging his side of the bed. Seeing his face in his profile picture, smiling, strong, the man who saw her as the center of his universe, steadied her. She debated what to write. A part of her wanted to pour out the anger and humiliation, to describe the sneer, the condescending tone, the lie about the blankets, the outrageous threat of having her restrained. But that wasn't her way. She was a scientist, a doctor. She dealt in facts and precise and objective observations. Hysteria and emotion were counterproductive. The facts of this situation were damning enough on their own. She typed, deleted, and retyped, her thumbs moving deliberately over the virtual keyboard. The final message was concise, professional, and devastatingly effective. It read, "Hi, honey. Hope you're sleeping well. I'm having a very difficult flight on AA7112 to Heathrow. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Tiffany Miller, has been exceptionally unprofessional and discriminatory. Her behavior goes far beyond poor service. It's created a hostile and humiliating environment. There's no need to do anything right this second, but we need to address this as a serious incident when I land. This is a systemic issue, not just a personal one. All my love." She read it over one last time. It was perfect. It conveyed the severity without melodrama. It named the employee and the flight. And the final sentence, "This is a systemic issue, not just a personal one," elevated the complaint from a simple grievance to a fundamental critique of the company's culture. It was the line she knew would resonate most with Marcus. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a builder who was fiercely proud of the institution he had created. A flaw in the system was a flaw in his legacy. She pressed send. The message icon showed a single check mark, then two. Delivered. She pictured the message arriving in the middle of the New York night, lighting up the screen of the phone on his bedside table. He was a light sleeper, especially when she was traveling. He would likely see it within the hour. A strange sense of calm settled over her. She had done what she could from 30,000 feet. The ball was no longer in her court. She had passed it to the one person who could ensure it landed with maximum impact. For the remainder of the flight, Tiffany Miller avoided the premium economy cabin entirely, sending Daniel to handle all passenger needs. When he passed by Evelyn's row, he would offer a furtive, anxious smile, which she returned with a gentle nod of reassurance. She bore him no ill will. He was a young man caught between his conscience and his superior. Evelyn leaned her head against the cool plastic of the window, watching the first faint hints of dawn breaking over the Atlantic. The sky was turning from inky black to a deep, bruised purple, streaked with veins of orange and pink. It was a beautiful, serene sight, a stark contrast to the ugliness she had experienced within the metal tube hurtling through the air. She didn't feel vengeful. She felt a profound sadness that this kind of prejudice still existed, so casually and confidently wielded. But she also felt a grim sense of purpose. This wasn't just Tiffany Miller's problem anymore. It was about to become a problem for all of Ascend. And change, Evelyn knew, often began with a painful reckoning. It was 1:37 a.m. in New York City when Marcus Thorne's phone buzzed on the polished mahogany nightstand. He stirred instantly, his senses on high alert, a habit ingrained from years of running a 24/7 global operation. He reached for the phone, expecting a late-night alert from the operations center about a mechanical issue or a weather diversion. When he saw the notification was a message from Evelyn, his heart skipped a beat. A message at this hour could only mean trouble. He sat up, the silk sheets pooling around his waist, and read the text. He read it once, then a second time, then a third, each word igniting a cold, quiet rage that was far more terrifying than any loud explosion of temper. His wife, the kindest, most brilliant and unassuming person he had ever known, the woman who spent her days fighting for the lives of children, had been humiliated, discriminated against, threatened, on his airline. The name Tiffany Miller burned itself into his memory. Flight AA712. He slipped out of bed and walked into the cavernous study of their Fifth Avenue penthouse. The glittering skyline of Manhattan spread out before him, a city that never slept. Tonight, Marcus Thorne wouldn't be sleeping either. He didn't smash things. He didn't yell. His anger was a laser, focused and precise. He picked up his secure office line and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a sleepy voice answered. Vance here. Robert Vance was the Executive Vice President of In-Flight Services and Customer Experience for Ascend. He was a man who prided himself on his ability to handle any crisis. He was about to face the biggest one of his career. Robert, it's Marcus Thorne. Vance was instantly awake, his voice snapping to attention. Mr. Thorne. Sir, is everything all right? No, Robert, everything is not all right, Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. I want you to pull the full employee file for a lead purser named Tiffany Miller. I also want the complete passenger manifest for flight AA72, currently en route from JFK to Heathrow. I want to know everything about her, commendations, complaints, service record, everything. And I want the unedited audio from the cockpit voice recorder for the duration of the flight, specifically any and all communications between the cabin and the flight deck. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Sir, may I ask what this is regarding? My wife, Dr. Evelyn Reed, is on that flight in seat 15C. She has just informed me that she has been subjected to discriminatory and hostile treatment by Ms. Miller. Get me that information. Then I want you and the head of human resources to be on the ground at Heathrow when that plane lands in 4 hours. You will meet the flight at the gate, not in the terminal. At the gate. You will board the aircraft before a single passenger gets off. Yes, sir, Vance stammered, frantically scribbling notes. Understood. We'll be there. One more thing, Robert, Marcus added, his voice dropping even lower. You will address my wife as Dr. Reed. You will offer her the airline's most profound and sincere apology. And then you will remove Ms. Miller from my aircraft. Discreetly but firmly. Her career with Ascend Air is over. The only thing left to discuss is the legal fallout she is about to face. Consider it done, Mr. Thorne. I am, Marcus said, and hung up. He then made a second call, this time to the head of the Ascend Air corporate legal team, waking her from a deep sleep. He explained the situation in the same calm, factual manner. He wanted a full internal investigation launched by sunrise. He wanted to explore options for new company-wide implicit bias and sensitivity training, effective immediately. He wanted this incident to become a never-again moment for the entire company. Back on Flight 712, halfway across the ocean, Captain Eva Rostova received an ACARS message on her cockpit printer. The text-based messages were usually for routine updates on weather or flight plans. This one was different. It was flagged urgent and originated from the highest level of Ascend Air's Global Operations Center. Urgent, VIP incident on board. Passenger Dr. Evelyn Reed, seat 15C, report of severe crew misconduct. Lead purser Tiffany Miller, await instructions. Do not engage purser on topic until advised. Confirm receipt. Captain Rostova, a stern Russian veteran with over 20 years of flying experience, exchanged a puzzled look with her first officer. A VIP incident that named a specific crew member was highly unusual and deeply troubling. She typed a quick confirmation. Minutes later, another message arrived. Exec VP Vance and HR rep to meet aircraft at Gate LHR. Delay deplaning until they are on board. Cooperate fully. Rostova's jaw tightened. Whatever had happened in the cabin was a catastrophe of the highest order. She had heard a brief, agitated call from Tiffany about a disruptive passenger in premium economy an hour or so ago, but Tiffany had claimed she had it under control. Clearly, she did not. Rostova made a decision. She needed to see the situation for herself. She put the plane on autopilot and walked back into the cabin. She found Tiffany in the forward galley, looking smugly satisfied. Tiffany, the captain said, her voice brooking no argument, a report of a passenger disturbance came through. Update me. Tiffany's face lit up, confident her actions would be vindicated. Oh, Captain, it was nothing I couldn't handle. We had a woman from premium economy, you know the type, demanding an upgrade, getting aggressive. I had to threaten her with security upon landing to get her to stand down. She's back in her seat now. Captain Rostova's eyes were like ice. Her name wouldn't happen to be Dr. Evelyn Reed, would it? Tiffany's smug expression faltered. A flicker of confusion, then alarm crossed her face. Yes, that's her. How did you know? We have a problem, Tiffany, Captain Rostova said, her voice dangerously low. A very big one. And I have a feeling it's your problem, not hers. The captain turned and walked back to the cockpit, leaving a suddenly very nervous Tiffany Miller alone in the galley, the hum of the engines sounding less like a promise of arrival and more like a countdown to doom. The gentle bump of the wheels hitting the tarmac at London Heathrow was followed by the roar of the engines in reverse thrust. For most passengers on Flight 712, it signaled the end of a long journey. For Tiffany Miller, it was the beginning of the end of her world. A knot of pure dread had been tightening in her stomach ever since her conversation with Captain Rostova. How did the captain know Evelyn's name? Why had her tone been so accusatory? As the plane taxied toward the gate, Tiffany went through the motions of preparing the cabin for arrival, her smile feeling brittle and fake. Her mind raced, replaying every interaction with the woman in the tracksuit. You know the type. Her own words echoed in her head, suddenly sounding ugly and incriminating. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now arrived at London Heathrow. Captain Rostova's voice came over the intercom, crisp and professional. The local time is 6:45 a.m. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate and the seatbelt sign has been switched off. We will be deplaning shortly. The plane docked at the gate with a soft thud. The engines spooled down. Passengers began to stir, gathering their belongings, eager to get off. The usual click-clack of unbuckling seatbelts filled the cabin, but the seatbelt sign did not turn off. Instead, another announcement came from the flight deck. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the slight delay. We ask for your patience. Please remain in your seats. The ground crew is connecting the jet bridge, and we will have you on your way as soon as possible. This was unusual. Tiffany saw Daniel shoot her a questioning look. She ignored him, her eyes fixed on the cabin door, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the jet bridge connect. She heard the latch on the door being unlocked from the outside. But instead of the usual ground staff, the door swung open to reveal two men in immaculate dark suits. One was a distinguished man in his late 50s with silvering hair and a grim, resolute expression. The other was younger, carrying a leather briefcase. They stepped onto the aircraft, and the door was closed behind them. The older man's eyes scanned the cabin crew, settling on Tiffany's name tag. "Tiffany Miller?" he asked. His voice was quiet but carried an authority that silenced the entire front cabin. Yes, Tiffany stammered. "I'm Robert Vance, Executive Vice President of In-Flight Services. This is Michael Corrigan from Human Resources. We need to have a word." He then looked past her, his eyes scanning the premium economy cabin until they found Evelyn, who was watching the scene unfold with a quiet, somber expression. Mr. Vance's entire demeanor changed. The stern corporate executive vanished, replaced by a man radiating profound contrition. He walked past the stunned Tiffany, through the curtain, and directly to seat 15C. He stopped in the aisle next to Evelyn. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice full of a respect that bordered on reverence. "I am Robert Vance. On behalf of Ascend Air, and personally from Mr. Marcus Thorne, I want to offer you our deepest, most sincere apologies for the deplorable experience you have had on this flight. What you endured is completely unacceptable and represents a catastrophic failure to uphold the values we stand for. We are profoundly sorry." A collective gasp went through the nearby rows. Passengers who had witnessed parts of the conflict were staring, their mouths agape. Mr. Henderson, the man in first class who had been so dismissive, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. But the true impact of Vance's words landed on Tiffany Miller. Mr. Marcus Thorne. The name echoed in the sudden silence of the cabin. Marcus Thorne, the legendary elusive founder and owner of the entire airline. Her mind reeled, trying to connect the dots. Dr. Reed, Evelyn R. Thorne. Her blood ran cold. The quiet woman in the gray tracksuit, the owner's wife. It was a moment of cataclysmic realization. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. Every sneer, every dismissive comment, every petty refusal flashed before her eyes, now cast in a horrific new light. She hadn't been putting an entitled passenger in her place. She had been personally and professionally insulting the most powerful woman in the entire company. "Ms. Miller," Vance said, his voice once again like granite as he turned back to her. "Please gather your personal belongings. Mr. Corrigan will escort you off the aircraft. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation which, I can assure you, will be swift and conclusive." Tiffany could only stare, speechless. Her face, which she had worked so hard to maintain as a mask of professional calm, completely crumpled. Tears welled in her eyes as the full scope of her miscalculation crashed down upon her. "Daniel Chen," Vance called out. Daniel, who had been standing by the galley looking pale, stepped forward. "Yes, sir? You will be the lead purser for the return flight. We've reviewed the preliminary report, and your conduct has been noted. Please assist Dr. Reed with her luggage and escort her off the plane first." Then he looked at Evelyn. "Dr. Reed, a private car is waiting for you on the tarmac to take you wherever you need to go." Evelyn finally spoke, her voice calm and clear, carrying through the silent cabin. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. That won't be necessary, but I do appreciate the gesture." She looked at Daniel and gave him a small, kind smile. "And thank you, Daniel." As Daniel helped her get her bag from the overhead compartment, Tiffany was led down the aisle by the HR representative, her head bowed in shame, avoiding the shocked and judgmental eyes of the passengers she had served. Her career, built over 15 years of meticulous service and carefully curated authority, had been dismantled in less than 15 minutes. She had stood guard at the gate of first class, only to discover she had insulted the woman who owned the entire kingdom. The click of the jet bridge door opening to let her out was the sound of her life irrevocably changing for the worse. The deplaning of Flight 712 was a subdued affair. Passengers whispered amongst themselves, stealing glances at Evelyn as she walked off the plane, escorted by a grateful and slightly dazed Daniel. As she stepped into the jet bridge, Marcus was there waiting for her. He had taken the company's supersonic jet, crossing the Atlantic in under 3 hours, a testament to his fury and his love. He wrapped her in a fierce embrace, his relief palpable. "Are you okay?" he murmured into her hair. "I'm fine," she whispered back, "just tired and sad that it had to happen at all." They walked away, leaving the chaos behind. In the days that followed, the consequences of Tiffany Miller's actions rippled through Ascendair with the force of a tidal wave. The investigation was, as promised, swift. Daniel's testimony, along with corroborating statements from several other passengers who had noticed Tiffany's behavior, painted a clear and damning picture. Tiffany was terminated for gross misconduct, a violation of the company's anti-discrimination and customer service policies. Her union appeals were denied. The airline industry is a small world, and the story of her spectacular downfall spread like wildfire. Blacklisted and disgraced, she found it impossible to get another job as a flight attendant. The last anyone heard, she was working a retail job at a suburban mall, a far cry from the glamorous, globe-trotting life she had cherished and lorded over others. Mr. Henderson, the arrogant passenger from first class, sent a fawning, handwritten letter of apology to the Ascendair corporate headquarters addressed to Dr. Reed, which she never saw. He was quietly downgraded from the airline's highest VIP status. But Marcus and Evelyn knew that punishing one employee wasn't the solution. The problem was deeper. Tiffany's confidence in her prejudice suggested a culture that, at some level, tolerated it. This single incident became the catalyst for the most significant corporate culture overhaul in Ascendair's history. Marcus, with Evelyn's input, instituted the Reed Protocol for Dignity and Respect. It was a mandatory top-to-bottom training program for all 50,000 Ascendair employees, from baggage handlers to the board of directors. Developed in partnership with leading sociologists and diversity experts, the program used interactive scenarios and real-life case studies, including an anonymized version of what happened on Flight 712, to combat implicit bias. It empowered employees like Daniel to report misconduct from superiors without fear of retribution, and implemented a zero-tolerance policy that was enforced without exception. Daniel Chen was promoted to lead purser within 6 months. His integrity and courage were celebrated within the company, making him a role model for the new standard of service Ascendair was striving for. He became a lead trainer for the Reed Protocol, sharing his first-hand experience to teach others the importance of doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. Months later, Evelyn was flying to another conference, this time in Singapore. As she boarded, dressed again in a comfortable travel outfit, the lead flight attendant, a young woman she'd never met, greeted her with a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Reed," the attendant said. "It is an absolute honor to have you on our flight today. My name is Maria, and if there is anything at all I can do to make your journey more comfortable, please do not hesitate to ask." Evelyn smiled back. "Thank you, Maria. I'm sure it will be a wonderful flight." She settled into her seat, this time in first class, a concession to her husband, and looked out the window. The karma that had struck Tiffany Miller wasn't just a simple, satisfying act of revenge. It was a hard, painful, and ultimately transformative force. It had ended one woman's career, but it had also sparked a movement that would ensure thousands of other passengers, regardless of what they wore, what color their skin was, or what cabin they were sitting in, would be treated with the dignity they deserved. The turbulence had passed, and for Ascend, the air ahead was finally truly clear. 6 months after her life fell apart at 30,000 feet, Tiffany Miller stood under the unforgiving fluorescent lights of a high-end department store in a sprawling New Jersey mall. The crisp, sterile air, perfumed with a dozen competing scents from the cosmetics counter, was a poor substitute for the recycled air of a 777 cabin, which had once smelled of possibility and prestige. Her uniform was no longer the sharply tailored Ascend navy blue, a symbol of authority and global travel. Instead, she wore a shapeless black polyester blouse and ill-fitting trousers, the mandatory attire for sales associates at Verdance. Her name tag, a cheap plastic rectangle, simply read Tiffany, no last name, no title, just Tiffany. Her feet throbbed. She had never known this kind of bone-deep physical exhaustion. As a flight attendant, she was on her feet for hours, but that was different. That was a dynamic, purposeful movement through a domain she commanded. This was a static, soul-crushing ache born from standing in one place for 8 hours, folding and refolding cashmere sweaters that cost more than her weekly paycheck. Her world had shrunk from the great cities of the world, London, Paris, Tokyo, to this 500-square-foot designer knitwear section. In the initial weeks after her termination, Tiffany had been consumed by a raging inferno of self-pity and blame. It was a conspiracy, a setup. That woman, Dr. Reed, or Mrs. Thorne, as she now knew, had played her. She had intentionally dressed down, a wolf in sheep's clothing, baiting her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Tiffany had complained bitterly to anyone who would listen. Her stunned parents, her few remaining friends, the stone-faced union representative who told her the evidence was insurmountable. She had just been doing her job, she insisted, upholding standards, protecting the sanctity of the first-class cabin, the very thing she was paid to do. But as the weeks bled into months and the rejections from every airline she applied to piled up, the fire of her indignation began to cool, leaving behind the cold, gray ash of reality. Her name was poison in the industry. The story, while not public, had become a legend whispered in crew lounges and galleys across the world. The cautionary tale of the purser who unknowingly crossed the owner's wife. Her savings dwindled. The lease on her chic Manhattan apartment was up, and she couldn't afford to renew. She was forced to move back into her childhood bedroom in her parents' suburban home, the walls still adorned with faded posters of places she used to visit every week. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on her every morning when she woke up. The job at Verdance was an act of desperation, secured through a family friend who didn't ask too many questions about why a senior international purser was suddenly seeking entry-level retail work. "Excuse me, hello." The voice was sharp, cutting through Tiffany's bleak reverie. A woman stood before her, dripping in designer labels. Her face was tight from cosmetic procedures, her blonde hair a perfect, unmoving helmet. She held up a beige sweater with a look of profound disgust. "This was on the floor," the woman said, holding the garment out with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "And there's a pull in the sleeve. I expect better from a garment that costs $1,200. Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to help me?" Tiffany's retail smile, a painful rictus she practiced in the mirror, clicked into place. "I am so sorry about that, ma'am. Let me find you a perfect one from our stockroom right away." The woman's eyes, cold and dismissive, swept over Tiffany from head to toe. It was a look Tiffany knew intimately. It was a look she had perfected. It was the scanner gaze that calculated a person's worth in a single, brutal second. "See that you do," the woman sniffed, turning her attention to her phone. As Tiffany walked to the back, the woman's voice followed her. "The service here has gotten just dreadful. You can't find good help anywhere these days." In the dim, cramped stockroom, surrounded by cardboard boxes and plastic-wrapped clothing, Tiffany leaned against a metal shelf, the sweater clutched in her hand. The woman's words echoed in her ears, a perfect mimicry of the thoughts she herself had so often had. "You know the type." She had said that to the captain, about Evelyn. But what type was this woman out front? Rich, entitled, demanding? The exact type of passenger she would have bent over backward for on a flight. She would have called her by name, offered her a glass of champagne, hung her coat with reverent care, all in the hopes of a glowing comment card that would bolster her career. She was now the help this woman found so dreadful. The irony was so thick, it was suffocating. This is what it felt like, to be invisible, to be a function, not a person, to have your entire being reduced to a single menial task by someone who saw you as nothing more than an obstacle or a convenience. A wave of nausea washed over her. She gripped the shelf to steady herself, her knuckles white. For the first time, a hairline crack appeared in the wall of her denial. Was this how Evelyn Reed had felt? Not just annoyed, but fundamentally diminished, stripped of her identity and accomplishments by a single, arrogant judgment call based on a tracksuit? The memory of Evelyn's face in the first-class cabin returned to her, unbidden. It wasn't furious, not in the way Tiffany herself had been. It was calm, clear, and filled with a profound, weary disappointment. It was the face of a person who had seen this exact behavior 1,000 times before and had simply reached her limit. Tiffany took a deep breath, her chest aching. She found a new sweater, inspected it meticulously, and walked back out to the sales floor. After completing the transaction with the demanding woman, forcing her smile to hold until the woman had swept out of the store, Tiffany felt hollowed out. She began tidying a display of silk blouses when she noticed a young woman hovering uncertainly near the entrance to her section. She was a black woman, probably in her early 20s, wearing jeans and a simple university sweatshirt. She clutched a well-worn backpack and looked around at the astronomical price tags with wide, intimidated eyes. The old Tiffany would have sized her up in an instant. "Can't afford anything here. Probably just browsing. Might even be a shoplifter. Best to watch her or ignore her until she leaves." That voice, that instinct, was still there, a toxic whisper in the back of her mind. But then, another image superimposed itself over the young woman. Evelyn Reed, standing calmly in the galley, asking for a blanket. And the memory of the blonde woman's sneer, "You can't find good help anywhere." Tiffany looked at her own reflection in the large mirror behind the counter. She saw the cheap blouse, the tired lines around her eyes, the dullness in her expression. The karma wasn't just that she had lost her job. The karma was being forced to stand here, day after day, and see the world from the other side of the counter. It was being forced to look in the mirror and see a stranger who had built her identity on a foundation of shallow judgments, an identity that had crumbled to dust the moment it was truly challenged. She made a choice. It was a small, quiet, momentous decision. She pushed away from the counter and walked toward the young woman, deliberately ignoring the poisonous whisper in her head. She softened her expression, letting the forced retail smile fall away, replacing it with something smaller, gentler. Something that she hoped looked kind. "Hi there," Tiffany said, her voice softer than it had been in months. "I know this section can be a little overwhelming. Is there anything I can help you find today? Or are you just enjoying a look around?" The young woman started as if she'd expected to be ignored or confronted. "Oh, my mom's birthday is coming up," she said nervously. "I saved up. I wanted to get her something really special. She's always dreamed of a real cashmere scarf from a place like this." Tiffany's heart gave a strange, unfamiliar lurch. "That's a wonderful idea," she said, and this time the smile was real. "We have some beautiful ones that just came in. Let me show you." For the next 10 minutes, Tiffany forgot she was a disgraced flight attendant. She was just a woman helping a daughter buy a gift for her mother. She showed the young woman the different styles, explained the quality, and helped her find one in her mother's favorite color that was within her budget. The young woman's face lit up, her initial intimidation replaced with pure joy. As Tiffany carefully wrapped the scarf in tissue paper and placed it in an elegant box, the young woman beamed at her. "Thank you so much. You've been so nice. I was really nervous to even come in here." "It was my pleasure," Tiffany said, and she meant it. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a grand moment of redemption. It wouldn't get her job back. It wouldn't erase the shame or the bitterness. But as she watched the young woman walk away with her precious gift, Tiffany felt a tiny, fragile seed of something new take root in the barren ground of her life. It was a flicker of understanding. The true weight of her actions hadn't been in the loss of her career, but in the countless small cruelties she had dispensed over the years. The little cuts to people's dignity she had never even bothered to notice. Her punishment was not this job. It was the dawning, agonizing awareness of the person she had been. And for the first time, she wondered if she could ever become someone else. The story of Dr. Evelyn Reed and Tiffany Miller is a powerful reminder that you can never judge a book by its cover. It shows how prejudice and arrogance can lead to a devastating downfall, and how true power lies not in authority, but in quiet dignity and unwavering integrity. Karma in this story wasn't just about punishment, it was about correction. It wasn't just about one person getting what they deserved, but about an entire system being forced to become better. It's a lesson that resonates far beyond the confines of an airplane cabin, reminding us all to treat everyone we meet with respect, because we never truly know their story or the impact they can have on the world. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life story of drama, justice, and the powerful lessons we can learn from them. What did you think of Tiffany's actions? Let us know in the comments below.